It's Quinn David Furness. Welcome to my show, Quinn David Furness Presents, the Beantown podcast for Sunday, April 5th, Palm Sunday. Oh, man. Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, an ass. Jesus sitting on his ass, going into town, getting waved down with palm trees. I don't really know why, It seems like palm branches. Why would you cut a bunch of branches off of trees just for, Jesus? All I'm saying is, maybe Jesus isn't this, big environmental activist that he's been touting himself as. Touting. Touting. Just a lot of things to think about on Palm Sunday. And we'll certainly be talking Jesus and God and plagues, all that good stuff next week on our Easter special. It's become an annual favorite of the listeners here on the Beantown podcast. My name is Quinn David Furness, and this is my show. The creator, writer, co-host, only host actually, co-host it with me, myself, and I. Best boy, key grip, caterer, electrician, gaffer. I hardly know her. And, all that other good stuff with original music by Quinn David Furness. Except for the music you're listening to right now. That's by Scott Joplin. Performed by Quinn David Furness. This is my show. We're coming to you live from quarantine. Quinn's quarantine. In fact, I have an Instagram series going right now called Quinn's Quarantine Comments. And they usually take place, it's like a saved, highlighted story on my Instagram page at q.queend. And they usually take place right after I've gone for a run. So I'm typically very hot and bothered, if you will. This is pretty much, we're about to start, the fourth full week of quarantine. Because I actually, so my birthday was kind of the kickoff to quarantine, March 16th. And I actually worked, that was my last day in the office. And then, 16th, 23rd, 30th, and tomorrow's the 6th. Yep. So we're getting started, getting ready for week 4 here. And, how are you doing? What's going on? You guys staying sane? What are you doing to pass the time? Have you picked up any new hobbies or skills under quarantine? If you do, you can let us know. You can email us. beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. Again, that's Beantown, Beantown podcast @yahoo.com. Or you can tweet at us. We're at BeantownCast. You can find me on Twitter at WhiteBuns. I'm also on Instagram at q.queend. And you can like our Facebook page, Beantown Podcast. Or you can subscribe to me on YouTube, Quinn Furness. Easy enough. But yeah, we're just hanging out. It's kind of a lazy Sunday. I'm going to go get a walk in later here. It's important, for me at least, to go out and do something every day. So let me kind of dig in here and talk to you about my routine. Because routine is very important to me. I'm a habit-driven individual. And I can't even imagine, what life would be like without, my routine or my routines, That's just 100% how I structure things, and I tend to get stressed a little bit. Not even anxious or nervous, just straight up stressed if my routine gets disrupted too much. I tend to get tired as well. But so Mondays, Monday through Friday I'm working. Wake up, brew my own coffee which is something that prior to quarantine I had only been doing on Sundays. Now I'm going through a lot of coffee over here. But I brew 1 pot a day, about 4 cups I drink. Pretty normal amount, I think. It's like the size of a grande Starbucks, I think. I don't know how those sizes work, because you got tall, you got grande, you got venti, and then you got the Trenta, right? Trendy. It's like the XL version. It's the secret version. It's not on the menu, but you can ask for that. I make my own coffee. I have a daily Zoom meeting for work, a daily staff session, compared to the norm before, which was weekly. The daily is fine. I find myself pretty much just sitting there every day watching, because the thing with these meetings is it's usually just like 2 or 3 people out of the 5 of us just like talking about what they're doing that day. It's not so much like, oh, we need to discuss this or have a conversation about this. It's just like sharing what they're doing each day. And I'm less inclined to do that, not for any reason in particular, but it just kind of seems like I'm wasting everyone's time just talking about my boring, mundane tasks, which is why I don't chime in as much on those daily staff meetings, because it happens every single morning. And occasionally, you have things that you need to discuss. But I also have individual meetings with my boss every week. So pretty much, and then, beyond that, communicating with her through Microsoft Teams and text and email, like, you get your stuff answered. So start off with a daily Zoom staff meeting, which is fine. It is what it is. And then every day, Monday through Thursday, I go for a run over my lunch break, which I tend to take closer to 3 or 4 in the afternoon, because I can have a much more effective run after I'm a little bit more exhausted mentally and physically, just been sitting on my butt, after 6 or 7 hours into the day. It feels nice. I still, in my life, and I've tried it on various occasions, and I've never been able to get into a habit, which is very important to me because it's never felt right. Running in the mornings, I just can't do it. Boy, it is really tough for me. The thing of it is, one, I tend to just be a little bit like colder in the morning from a body temperature perspective, and I'm much less inclined, particularly in times like this where it's high 30s outside, to wake up in the morning and have it be 7 a.m. and like, all right, kids, let's go outside, because I'm cold. I want to warm up. My muscles tend to be a lot more tight in the morning. And then physically when I go out, and it's been like this my whole life, and it's not just running, it used to be like swim practice too, which is why I ended up just like giving up on morning practice after a while in high school. I just feel awful. Like not even like tight or sore or nauseous, just like my body is not interested in doing anything like that. I used to run with a friend in Baltimore when I lived out there, Beantown, #. And we would go for runs at about 6 a.m. And, that would mean, I'd wake up at like 5:15 every day to walk to her apartment, and then we'd go for a run. I don't know, it was 5:30 or 6 a.m., I don't remember. And we'd usually run like 5Ks in Baltimore, downtown. And I remember even in those runs, even running with a friend, which is usually way easier, although I almost never do it, I just never felt into it either. So that's why I run later in the afternoon. By the time I get back, work is pretty much over. I shower, yada, yada, yada. On Monday nights, I cook, big batch. That's not true to quarantine. That's a Quinn David Furness thing in general. Let's see. Last week we made like a kind of a hodgepodge stew. It had a little bit of everything. There was no real theme. It almost turned into, from like a spices and flavoring perspective, it almost turned into like a gumbo kind of thing. Just because I threw in some andouille sausage, and that really like not overpowered, but really dominated the flavor profile of the stew. This week, let's see, tomorrow night, what are we making? Something kind of similar, except this one last week was more like chicken based. This week is more beef based. So it'll be a lot of like stew meat, which is beef and beef broth. But we'll have kind of the classics in there. So I got some lentils. I even got some barley. My grocery store had stopped selling barley for a while, but they're back. So barley's back on the menu, boys. And let's see, the protein, besides that beef, we got some turkey bacon. I'm a big turkey bacon guy. I even got some ground turkey, and I got some like cubed chicken as well, which doesn't really like fit with the stew, but if I'm having this for like 5 or 6 straight days, then I need it to last. For veggies, I do pretty much what you'd expect, right? You got some garlic, some onion, celery, green pepper, carrots, and then on this one, because it's more of a beef-based thing, we're doing mushrooms and big fan of this, radish. So you go online, and pretty much any respectable beef stew you're going to find is going to call for potatoes. I sure love them French fried potatoes. That's my sling blade. More like my Scott Farrell. We got a message. Ooh. Oh, this is very exciting. We're going to be talking about this message I literally received. I'm not sure if it came through on the audio, but very exciting times. We're going to have a guest next week on the podcast. That is awesome. Talk about that after we read our ads here. But that stew, so radishes instead of potatoes. If you never tried this, I encourage you to do that because I feel pretty strongly about this. I know some people aren't quite on board, but I feel that once you cook down radishes, once you get them in the stew and you steam them out a little bit, they pretty much have the exact same consistency as potatoes if you were going to throw potatoes into a stew, except radishes, you don't go overboard on the carbs, and they're really good at kind of filling space, taking on the flavor of, their environment, because radishes, like potatoes, don't have a lot of like natural flavor. They're just kind of there. So I'm a big fan. In fact, I don't even think, I'm thinking back all the way back to June when I moved here. I don't think I've bought a potato, in 10 months. Even before that, when I did live in Beantown, I almost never, maybe like once or twice, literally, in my years of living there, did I buy a bag of potatoes. This doesn't mean I'm always killing it with the low-carb game, but I just, and I love potatoes as much as the next guy. I just made the executive choice to keep them away from my diet. Unless I'm, on a cheat day or something and I have some French fried potatoes. If you didn't understand the reference to Scott Farrell, we'll jump into that in the second half too. I'll give you a status update. We're going to keep this podcast pretty short. One, because I want to go outside and go for a long walk. Two, there's something going on with my heart right now. Just like some irregular rhythmic beating. It's kind of strange. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not a cardiologist. So I might need to just lie down and not record for a second. But so we cook on Monday nights, big old batch in my 16-quart, my favorite kitchen item, my 16-quart stainless steel pot, which is great for big batches. I'm a big batch kind of guy. And I tell you what I've been doing this week, or not this week, under quarantine. Really in 2020, I've been, dieting hard and exercising a decent amount. But because out of concerns for the fact that I'm spending so much time sitting on my ass, even though I'm running 5 times a week, which we'll talk about in a second, and going for walks most days in addition to a run, or like days like today, I'll just be one long walk and maybe a little guy otherwise. But, you're not like walking to the train. You're not walking around your office. Even when I'm in my office, I actually have to go walk up to the second floor just to use the bathroom, which obviously happens, 5 or 6 times a day. Now when I want to go to the bathroom, it's like 10 steps to the toilet. So there's just a lot less movement going on. And so because of those concerns, out of caution, we've gone pretty damn Spartan. And I should mention that listener discretion is advised. When you're listening to the Beantown podcast, number 1, we'll occasionally use some language, and I apologize for that. Number 2, this podcast is objectively terrible. So I'm down to 1 meal a day. And I'd say on average, I have 2 bowls of whatever I have, whether it was the chicken and lentils thing I had last week, or chili, or we had jambalaya the week before that. This week's more of a kind of a beef stew, beef and turkey stew, and chicken. It's one of everything. Pick your poison. But struggling with my train of thought here. I apologize. 1 meal a day, probably like around, 13 or 1,400 calories total on the average day, Monday through Friday. The way it works, I wake up, I have my coffee, go for a walk around noon or so, about a mile usually, come back, do some work, and then basically right in the mid-afternoon around 3 or so, and just when you're starting to feel that hunger really creep in, and I should mention it's very important to drink lots and lots of water. That's when I go for my run. And I was noticing it a little bit this week, particularly on Thursday and then yesterday in my long run, where, the low number of calories is catching up with me slightly. Your muscles don't recover quite as fast. Motivation's a little bit lower. Your overall body energy is certainly a little bit lower. So that's something you gotta monitor when you're doing not only 1 meal a day but also low calorie, because those two things usually aren't coupled with each other. If you're doing 1 meal a day, you usually still get like a normal amount of calories. You just eat a lot more than I am right now. But because what I'm cooking is so kind of nutrient rich, but not necessarily dense from a caloric perspective, because it's basically just vegetables and protein. I get full without, going crazy on calories, which I suppose is a good thing. But it can also mean lower energy levels. So I eat dinner usually about 7 p.m. every day. And I usually don't have to worry about hunger much. Occasionally on a weekday, you'll get hungry a little bit earlier then you're ready to go for your run, and you got to just kind of put up with it or ignore it for about an hour or 2 in the afternoon. But usually it's not the end of the world. Running, I've been running Monday through Thursday. In terms of distance on those days, it just kind of depends on how I feel. Usually between those 4 days, it comes out to an average of about 15 miles total. So we're not doing anything crazy. That's, it's like 3.75 average per day. And I run, anywhere in the kind of 8-minute pace range, usually between 8 and 8:30, something like that. It'll usually be like 2 5Ks, a 4-miler, and then a 5-miler. That's pretty typical for those Monday through Thursday runs. They get tougher as they go, right? Monday, you've just had a day off, which is Sunday, and your energy is pretty good. You feel pretty good on Tuesday as well. Wednesday, you're also actually, at least for me, still feel fine, but you're also getting a little bored. And then by Thursday, it's like your energy levels are pretty low, and you're just kind of tired of running every single day. So I take Friday off. I go for a long walk on my Fridays. I have my new route. I go west to Warren Park, and then down south, and then I cut back east through Little India, which is an interesting place. Not that exciting. There's not that much to like see or experience. It's just kind of a strip. But then on Saturdays, run number 5 of 5 for the week. You go for a long run. These last couple weeks, I've been going up north into Evanston, which is nice because you can actually run and be by the lake up there. And the lakefront kind of, parks and paths up there, there's a decent amount of room to spread out and operate, because you get a lot of people up there, which makes sense. And certainly people from like Edgewater and Rogers Park in Chicago will go up there as well, because you can't go to the lake in Chicago, but you can in Evanston. So I've been going up there. I did like 11 miles last Saturday. Yesterday I did like 8.5. And those are tough as well on the low calorie. And boy, I tell you what, when I got back yesterday, I was really fried. Actually, I had to work yesterday, and so I didn't get out until about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And by the time that was all over, between working and then going for a long run, and it was really cold, I was pretty much just like settled in for the rest of the night. And I actually had a little bit more energy than I expected I would after I showered up and finally got something to eat. I rebounded a little bit, talked to some friends and stuff, but was just kind of on the couch the whole time. So energy levels are pretty low, but you know what? You might be listening to this thinking, Quinn, you're absolutely nuts. You're crazy. You got to eat something. It's not like I'm fasting, right? You all know this story by now. It's on the Beantown blog. The time I fasted for a week in college was not a fun experience. No, we're keeping things pretty low maintenance. My big fear is like that knowing kind of my eating habits are a very slippery slope in general historically, and that I'm not moving this much. I'm just trying to keep it very like minimalist, very straightforward, trying not to think about it that much, because then I'll just get like an anxiety attack, which you try to avoid typically if you can. So couple that with the fact that I'm still sober this year. It is April 5th, which is day 60 days through February 31, 91. What are we on, like 96 maybe? Day 96, I think, which is exciting. And no pizza yet this year either. Although I feel not that there are cracks starting to show in that resolve or that it's weakening, but I just had more like craving for it. I don't feel any closer to like giving in and having a pizza yet this year than I did, back in January or February when I was cruising. I've just been thinking about it a lot more. In fact, when I go on my long runs up into Evanston, you go by Giordano's right by my old place on Farwell Ave. And boy, the smells really just hit me yesterday. I don't know if there was a particularly strong aroma coming out of those ovens, or if I was just kind of food deprived and craving pizza. But I'm in pretty good shape. I think the best news is that, the only pizza place that's really close to me is Domino's, and man, that pizza is just like, I know people who consider it to be their favorite fast food pizza. I think it's my least favorite, frankly. I'll take like a Little Caesars pizza over a Domino's. Papa John's has its own set of issues, but I'll take that over Domino's. Pizza Hut is my favorite. Definitely take that over Domino's. I can't think of a single fast food chain pizza that I think of in a more low perspective viewpoint than Domino's. I really don't like it. I think it's bad. I'm not that close to any of like specialty places or deep dish places. I'm about a mile away from 2 pizza places by my old apartment, the Giordano's and then JB Alberto's, classic spot. But it's just far enough of a walk, like 20 minutes total, to where I'm like, it's too far. And I really don't even think about it very often, which is good. But that's a little glimpse into my routine. Weekends are, I think that's been the toughest thing for me, is like in general, I feel good about, my work-life balance, because I work pretty hard Mondays through Fridays, but usually, you have the weekends to kind of reset, get out, do something different than your norm. That's been the toughest part of quarantine, I think, for me, is feeling like my weekends aren't really this, different than Monday through Friday. They're not really that change of pace. And I just kind of feel like I live my life in one spot in my apartment, even on weekends. That's probably my least favorite part about all of this. But again, I try not to think about that too much either, because then I just get mild anxiety attacks. Nothing, I have a couple here and there, maybe once or twice a week. Nothing that wild. Nothing I can't manage. I'm just not used to getting them. I can be a very anxious and nervous person in general in my life, but I don't usually get these attacks where it's like, a solid 20 to 30 minutes of just feeling kind of crippled and paralyzed. Those have been coming, now with a ton more frequency than they ever had before in my life. So that's been a challenge. And I think part of it is living alone and not really having any interaction with humans, but we're doing our best here. Let's read some ads, and then I've got just two things that I'll briefly mention in the second half, and we'll shut it down. It's a very low-key episode, very low-key installment. No grand thesis to this episode. No guests, just Quinn, just catching up with you. I feel right now like I've got my hands in like a couple other outlets where I've been connecting with people through like Instagram a decent amount, my workout videos, which will probably drop another one this week. Facebook, I didn't do much on Facebook this past week, but in general, I've still been on it a decent amount. And then, a decent amount of like FaceTimes and stuff. So I feel like a little bit less like I need to pour everything into the podcast because, I think, I'm getting, I'm interacting with you all through other mediums. But let's read the ads here, and we'll touch on a couple things in part 2, which will just be a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Keep it pretty short. Remember in the old days, year 1, first couple months of Beantown podcast, it'd be like 20 minutes long, 25 minutes long, and be like, wow, that was a long episode. Now, if you keep it under 30, that's like, maybe it's been years since that happened. I don't really remember. This one's not going to go under 30. We'll keep it around 35, though. Home Pride, Oregon. Are you tired of selling your house for less than a quarter of what it's worth, all because you couldn't find a reliable home inspector in time? Well, Oregon listeners, there's good news. Home Pride Inspection Services in Bend, Oregon is Central Oregon's hottest new home inspection provider, with inspection services including things like heating and cooling, roofing, plumbing, and so much more. Home Pride Oregon is both contractor certified and home inspection certified, so you know you're getting the good stuff. If you're tired of big real estate's stranglehold on the home inspection market and you want a safe, certified home inspector that you can trust, you gotta call Steve at 541-410-0316, or you can visit homeprideoregon.com. Again, that's 541-410-0316, or you can visit homeprideoregon.com. Home Pride Oregon, inspection perfection. Shout out to the Samson Q2U series. Working hard, working overtime, doing a lot of work on the Scott Farrell audiobook, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And during this special Holy Week edition, today's Palm Sunday, next week will be Easter Sunday, and we'll be talking about a lot of things, God, religion, and Christianity next week on the podcast. With our guest, I suppose. I'm excited. I got to think about this a little bit. Wait till you announce who it is. Because it's someone who's very involved in the church. And we'll see what he has to say for our Easter holiday. The Samson Q2U series, when God speaks, he uses a Samson. I want to give a special thank you to our tax expert in residence, Matt Fiedler, for coming on the Beantown podcast last week for our 3rd annual Beantown podcast taxes special extraordinaire, where Quinn David Furness comes on his own show live to release his taxes, which you can just imagine happened. Thanks to Matt for coming on. And in case you didn't catch the full episode, we made a pact where we are not shaving or cutting our hair until quarantine is over. And I think I gave my full list of like caveats on the show, but I'll reiterate them here. I'm shaving my neck beard, and I'm shaving the back of my neck too. The neck beard is just absurd. It's ridiculous. No one likes it. Doesn't look good. Doesn't feel good. Not fun for anyone. The back of the neck thing, you can actually get away with it because I'm not, no one's ever actually seeing the back of my neck these days. But it's just kind of like, turn into a werewolf. Try to keep it clean. And that's what Cuts by Q is there for. But thanks to Matt for coming on the show and sharing his insight and his expertise. We actually I almost forgot about this. We actually got some angry fan mail from Matt. And we requested that the author of that fan mail come on the show and debate with Matt on today's episode. But that anonymous author declined the invitation, unfortunately. So you can tell them, you can send all your grief their way. And it is what it is. Cuts by Q, bob and weave. We all know the hairstyle and we all love it. But how many Chicago-based independent barbers can actually give it to you the way you deserve? Enter Cuts by Q. It's like Enter Sandman, but different. Cuts by Q has been independently owned and operated since 1995 and is probably one of the better barbershop operations serving Chicago, Cook County, and the greater Chicagoland area, including Northwest Indiana. From beehives to bangs, faux hawks to flat tops, and everything in between, you got to call Cuts by Q at 815-298-7200 or email cutsbyq@yahoo.com. Again, that's Q-U-T-Z. By Q at yahoo.com. Oh, when you need a fresh do, something snappy and new, just call the experts at Cuts by Q. I'm drinking out of my Jack Link's travel mug here. And the only reason I mention it is because I was actually re-listening. I don't re-listen to a lot of my own shows. Especially, historically, I don't go back and just pick random ones to listen to. Not very often. But I did listen to the Baked Alaska episode, which is late July 2018. I did with my two older brothers from the Ted L. Stevens International Airport in Anchorage, which was fun. And one thing that I had forgotten just how much time we spent talking about this in year one of the podcast was the potential for a Jack Link's sponsorship on the podcast. And I know it's not something I talk about as much these days. I think I'm just kind of battered and weary after so many failed attempts to get into a partnership negotiation with them. But man, we spent a solid 5 minutes just talking about Jack Link's, yearning for their endorsement. So consider this just a refresher. And let's see. There's one other thing. Oh, I wanted to mention this when I was reading my ad reads. It reminded me of 670 The Score, which I listen to every morning immediately before and after our morning staff meeting. And it's usually the Bernstein McKnight show, Dan Bernstein, Connor McKnight. And unfortunately, Thursday after the show, they let go of Connor McKnight in a wave of cutbacks. Connor is no longer on the air, no longer on the show, which is very sad. And it was really painful listening to Dan Bernstein kind of tearfully talk about it Friday morning on the show. And can you imagine how hard that is, being used to hosting a 3-hour radio show with a co-host, someone else who fills in half the time, half the content, all that stuff. And all of a sudden, you got 3 hours to do by yourself. That's a long time. Considering these podcasts are, usually less than an hour. So for Dan, I know you don't listen to my show, but I tweet at you all the time. Thanks for everything you do. And Connor, hoping to, see where you land on your feet next. Two last pieces of business here, and we'll wrap it up. One is just a quick check-in on Scott Farrell's biography, or Triumph, Tears, and Tales of the Stage by Scott Farrell. We talked about this in depth last week on the show, so I won't dig into it much, but just giving everyone a status update, we are officially to the last chapter. The next time I hit the record button, it will be to start this final chapter in not Scott's life, because the book goes through, I think, 2016 is the last chapter before he publishes the book. So we're already, there's already another 4 years of his life story. Who knows? Maybe he'll write another volume, which God knows we'd have to do another audiobook project. But yeah, we're to the last one. It's kind of bittersweet. I will say this: when quarantine really hit hard and started, I was kind of on fire with this book. I mean, when quarantine started, I was only about a third of the way through the recording, or 5 hours in or something like that. And then I really worked hard on it, chugged and burned through a lot of it, up until about a week ago. And I really sort of started to lose my steam. Good news is now I only have another probably less than 90 minutes left of recording to do. So we're very close. That'll be finished either this week or next, at which point I'll only have to write my critical review, figure out how I'm going to distribute and disseminate the audiobook, and that's it. Then the project is over. So a couple more things to kind of finish up and clean up and figure out there, because it's not going to be a super straightforward sort of process. But yeah, it's almost done, which is wild to think. I haven't done the math to see exactly where it's going to come out to. I know at the beginning, I remember doing this out at my parents' house over Christmas, trying to calculate how much time it was going to be total. And I think we came to somewhere around 16 or 17 hours. It's got to be more than that, because of just the added commentary that I've put in there. But probably 17 or 18 hours, I think, is probably about what it's going to be. So that's almost up. The last thing I'll mention here, and we literally, we're recording this about 1 p.m, live on air, got a message from a former employee. If you made it this far on the podcast and you're familiar with my childhood, which you aren't, but you'll be excited to hear this. Tim Muther, it's kind of a Breaking Bad story, the former chemistry teacher at Rockford Lutheran High School in Rockford, Illinois, and by summer area manager, regional manager, something like that. I remember how those titles worked, of Team Corn Detasseling, based out of Princeton, Illinois, Lovers Lane Road. We had sent him a message, get this, back in, I think, July, asking if you want to be on the podcast, because it would, this guy is just wild, and you don't know what he's going to say next, or ever, for that matter. Tim is great. We sent him a message back in July. He responded last week, right? So 9 months later. And I was afraid that, with this kind of historical pace in terms of him responding messages, that even if we did get him on the podcast, that it wasn't going to be till 2023. But we just got another message, so we sent a couple back and forth from me to Tim, and I'm just reading it now for the first time. He says, "Does this coming Saturday work, say 4 p.m.? Surely it would boost the podcast numbers. Perhaps we could generate a list of questions ahead of times." Absolutely, we could. And I don't want to make any promises, because it could very well be that I send him back a message later this afternoon with some questions. And, we'll be talking quarantine. We'll be talking Easter for sure. We'll be talking corn detasseling for all. That'll be interesting for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And just with Tim's spin on it, it'll be great. But it could be that he doesn't respond till next year. Hopefully he responds tomorrow, but it could be next year. So there's kind of my forewarning for you all. But Tim is awesome. He's the father of 3 daughters, all of them whom are out of the house now. Although right now, who knows? But Tim's great. Used to be the assistant coach of the Rockford Lutheran soccer team as well, so we'd butt heads there. But Tim is just basically my first ever boss, because I started that job when I was 12. And worked it until I was 18. Tim's a good guy. Tim is a wild guy. And there are, we could do a whole detasseling podcast, and maybe next week sort of turns into that. But there are other people I could bring on here. We could share stories, because, in fact, it would be best to just get my brothers on, I think, of Team Corn Detasseling, because, man, there's some wild stuff that you do. And just it seems like such a foreign concept now, but just the idea of being 12 or 13 years old, you're still very much a kid. You're just scratching the surface of being a teenager. You're just like a little kid at that point. You're out there working 7 or 8 hours, waking up at 4:30 a.m., packing lunch and a shit ton of water because you're working in the middle of July and August in cornfields in central Illinois. Man, hard as balls work. I've worked some weird jobs in my 25 years, but nothing comes close to that in terms of just the overall, manpower, physical labor, hours. I can't remember exactly. I think when I started when I was 12, which would have been, like 2006, 2007, I think I was making like six an hour, probably something like that. And I rose through the ranks. By the time I finished, I was a crew leader, which was fun to put on my resume. It means I was in charge of a whole bus full of 12-year-olds. And at that point, I was making closer to like 12 an hour, which now sounds awful. Back then, when you're, 17, 18, making 12 an hour is not bad. It's actually pretty good. At least it was for me growing up. I don't know about you all. But that's Tim. Tim Muther no longer lives in Rockford. Is in the St. Louis area these days. But hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood for us, we will get Tim on the podcast next week for our Easter special. Boy, that would be something, because Tim also is an active member in the Lutheran community. So I would love to get some of his perspective on stuff. And there are stories about Tim at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Rockford, Illinois, falling asleep during service and snoring and stuff. And he's just this kind of awesome, like, middle-aged guy who does whatever he wants, but is also just like a genuinely good person. And a crazy driver. So, oh man, I'm really hoping we get him on the air, because they're every once in a while you get a guest on the show that's like, oh my God, this lives here forever. This is amazing. My grandma Sal is a perfect example of that. I think having the roast of Quinn David Furness was awesome, because we got pretty much everybody in my family, including my grandfather, on that show. Having Joaquin call in on the podcast was pretty special, because he can be a tough guy to get a hold of. Having Aaron call in on my telethon fundraiser was pretty cool. There are just certain people who are just kind of very little parts of your life that can be easy to forget about, especially after you've moved away and you're in a different stage of your life. But these are still people who had an important impact or an important part of your life story up to this point. So any chance I can get to reconnect with them, and then also get them recorded on tape, so that it lives on forever, and I can go back and listen to that and sort of cherish that relationship anytime I want, that's really special to me. So I'm hoping we get that next week with Tim. But I already went longer than I wanted to. I apologize for that. That's what I had for you on this week's entry into the Beantown podcast. Next week is Easter. I hope everyone's quarantine is going well. For those workout videos, you want to go to my YouTube page and follow me at Quinn Furness, or check us out on Instagram. We're at q.queend. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns at any point, email us, beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. Again, that's Beantown, Beantown podcast at yahoo.com. Thanks last week to Matt Fiedler for coming on the show. We're going to get some Tishmingo Blues going to play us out. What do you mean to play us out? There's no words there. And you know what? Stay safe, stay sane, be kind to one each other is what I was trying to say. And you know what? Go out there, stretch your legs, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, rain or shine. It's like the mailman's creed. That's what I got for you. So I'm going to turn on some music, and you should do the same. Enjoy your week, and we'll check in on you next time.